Neisner, I mean, you could be in a flat here in Neisner, but we live on a small holding just outside of town. So that's, I mean, even better.
Oh, amazing. Huh? I think it's the best part of the country.
Well, I mean, there are pros and cons. I mean, I know you're in the, some part of you's in the corporate game. And, you know, that's sort of where I'm wanting to go, but it's not so simple if you want to live in the sticks, hey?
No. You'll have to go to one of the major centers. And you just got, you got Durban, Cape Town, or yeah. But Durban's not a bad place.
Where are you now? You in Durban?
No, Johannesburg.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always been a thing. I mean, you will know from a stress point of view, and this is where I want to have most of the conversation is, I chose lifestyle first. You know, my brother was in the corporate game. He said he was going to work like mad, and then he's going to retire at 50 and live the good life. I decided that wasn't who I was. I was going to choose lifestyle first. I mean, and there are pros and cons to it. The irony about that is my brother passed away at 36. So not because he was chasing the Yankee dollar or anything, but it's just one of the things I've chosen.
No, I think if you look at it with clarity and perspective, I think that your choice is great. I think a lot of people aspire to your decisions.
I know.
And we always think the grass is green on the other side. It's not.
You know the story about the Thai fisherman and the businessman who comes down and he sees him go out fishing. Have you heard the story?
No.
So I'll make it very short, but essentially the guy says, well, listen, if I was you, I'd go out and I'd catch an extra fish and I'd sell that fish and then I'd get another boat and I'd get my cousin and blah, 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 all the way up and I'd have this whole fleet. And the guy said, yeah, and then what? In the end, he said, yeah, then you retire. You know, retire where? You retire to a beach that you can play guitar and drink whiskey with your wife. He says, well, that's what I do every day. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Anyway, Richard, so I just wanted to check time-wise. Do you have any restrictions?
Yeah, I've got till 3:30.
Okay.
So I've got half an hour.
Okay, fantastic. And anything specifically that you want me to go through, or how to structure this, or anything? I mean, you've done this a lot.
No, I think as you're comfortable and what resonates and what's relevant to you. Okay.
Cool. So, Richard, thanks very much for agreeing to have a brief chat. I just wanted to give the people that I'm sharing this with a little bit of a brief overview, and please, you must add in where I may have missed, but I don't want to go too much into your CV. That might take half an hour in itself. So Richard has worked with Olympic teams, tennis stars, #1 tennis players. One of my favorite is Kevin Anderson. I am quite patriotic. And you've done various things from a sports point of view. And where I would like to be picking your brain today is more on the stress front. And we may go into how that is going to be affecting the immune function and the awareness around that with the current crisis in South Africa and in the world. But having read your book and seeing some phenomenal things, one of my great beliefs is that stress and state of mind is a major part of performance, productivity, stress, general health. So how did you get into this? I mean, I know you've got various qualifications. You're a clinical kinesiologist, you're a visceral manipulative therapist. From what I understand, you're also an osteopath.
Visceral osteopath, yes.
So what does that mean?
I think that the expertise lies within the ability to manipulate and manually adjust various organ systems of the body. So whether it be liver, heart, lungs, and related. And the rationale behind this type of methodology is through intimate nerve connections that of from the organ to joint structures, to muscles, to other systems of the body that could create health issues or manifest or promote pain and pain sensitivity. So what I'm saying, simply put, is that organs can cause pain, pain can cause organ dysfunction, and this field centers really around the manipulation of these variables and these issues at its source.
And are you actually practicing hands-on?
No, I stopped practicing a while back. So you mentioned the corporate space. My skill set is quite broad, and I've really been involved, as you mentioned, in enhancing the performance of teams and individuals for many decades, actually 2 decades. And one's knowledge set and one's basic job description is extremely expansive. You have to know a lot about a lot all the time in order to help teams overcome obstacles, help athletes come over obstacles. And then later in my career, it ended up moving in the direction of the corporate space, where it was CEOs that were approaching me to find health solutions, to find performance solutions, productivity solutions, and those CEOs started bringing me into their business. And then within a couple of years, it became a business model where I was focusing on enhancing and augmenting the well-being of teams and assisting with the elimination of health inequality, etc. So it's been a very interesting journey, and every skill set and every skill that you develop through the course of your career really kind of builds in this knowledge repository. But this being said, asking if I do any manual work anymore, I haven't done manual therapies for many years.
Okay. So, I mean, this is something that I'm very passionate about with my chiropractic background, and about specific neurological function, proprioception, how it affects brain function, performance, productivity. So, I mean, the interesting thing, it sounds like we're on a very similar trajectory, even though I'm probably a few years behind. So, when we're having a look from one of the things that you have on your website is the World Health Organization says that stress is now a worldwide epidemic. What I want to touch on is how do you feel the scenario at the moment with this COVID-19 is going to be affecting the country, firstly, and then the world from a stress perspective, and what is the long-term effect that that's going to have, knowing that
Well, I think,
yeah,
I think that's an amazing question. And in terms of that question, this is a very interesting time. And why I say it's an interesting time is because I think for the first time in history, we've had 2 converging health epidemics. So a couple of years ago, the World Health Organization cited stress as the health epidemic of the 21st century. And then a few months ago, all of a sudden we have COVID-19. And the 2 are feeding into each other, so to speak, because stress can cause dysfunctions and disruptions and abnormalities within our immune system, predisposing us to, whether it's a cytokine storm or whether it's increased symptoms or increased infection rates. But it does create vulnerabilities with respect to and in response to the virus. The virus itself is creating a tremendous amount of stress. So you have this bidirectional loop that is driving a cycle that will become extremely destructive in the long term. So we've been in this movie now for a couple of months. It was a problem that existed in China. I think it was first documented in the beginning of December or late November last year. The genetic codes for COVID-19 were identified on the 11th of January, if I'm not mistaken. A vaccine went into trials, human trials, on the 16th of March. So the curve has been very steep in terms of trying to find solutions. The problem is that it's not going to be an overnight situation. So we exposed to this, first was the anticipatory stress, worrying about what happens to our lives when it affects us. How's our financial position going to be affected? How's our security? There was a tremendous anticipation, uncertainty. Then it was the realization, almost the acceptance phase, where we realized that we can't change the circumstances we're confronted with, and that we have to certainly accept it. And we got into a little bit of a groove. We're saying, this is what it is. I'm enjoying being in quarantine with my family at home. But now we're entering into a new phase, which is the full realization of consequences phase. And that really is a very interesting time, because now we're saying, okay, well, I've got to pay my staff, I've got to pay my bond, I've got to pay my rates and taxes, and I haven't had funds come in. I haven't had the opportunity to work. I haven't had all these things that were taken for granted. And I think that now the real stress of COVID-19 is about to entrench itself. And as my book states, and as you know, short-term stress can be very health promoting. It's a mobilizer. It makes us more energetic. It helps us focus, more mentally agile, so to speak. But stress in the medium term, which we now in, where we're months on end, a couple of months in on this, is a little bit more destructive. And right now, a lot of us might be showing symptoms of either anxiety or sleeplessness, or even a little bit of low mood or physical pain. So this will start materializing at this particular juncture, but we're now going to move into the more chronic phase, which is more the long term, because it's very unlikely that the situation that we're confronted with now is going to change within the short term. And the reason why is that the only time this risk profile, this risk factor that's attributed to COVID-19 is going to be eliminated is when there's a vaccine freely available, or there's a cure that's been found. It's a highly contagious disease. We know that in South Africa, the underreporting is by about 4 to 7. So for every individual who has been confirmed with COVID-19, there's about 7 individuals who haven't been confirmed with COVID-19 that have got it. We do know that there are some unusual symptoms, whether it be increased clotting. So we're seeing a 700% higher risk of strokes in younger individuals, those who have been exposed to the coronavirus. We also know that the fatality rate is not as bad as I previously thought. It's about 0.4 to 0.7%. So there's a lot of information that's unfolding, but at the same time, just this lack of knowledge and lack of understanding is causing us to become more and more and more stressed, with all these compounding elements saying, my reality has changed. Am I able to recalibrate it? This hypervigilance that I've been in for the last month has burnt me out. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I've been trying to find solutions. And this, in my opinion, is going to trigger the third health epidemic. And the third health epidemic is an immune epidemic. And what's been very well documented is that the earlier phases of stress there's this mobilization of your immune system. So for 2 to 30 minutes of that first wave of stress, you've got immune cells coming from your bone marrow, from your spleen, from your lung, from certain lymph nodes entering in the system. And then the adrenaline kind of wears off a little bit and cortisol kicks in, and the cortisol basically takes all those immune cells and puts them in strategic sites in cases an infection, or in cases an assault through microorganisms, or in case there's damage to tissue. But if this is going on day and day and day and day, and what's going to happen eventually is the first phase of this issue is going to be where your cells are going to say, look, I can't respond to these hormones anymore. It's just too exhausting, and there must be a glitch in the system. This can't be natural. So the first thing that happens is immunosuppression, where anything that comes your way, things that would normally not impact you, whether it be fungus or yeasts. Now you're getting yeast and fungus infections, or bacterial infection. I'm not even talking about viruses that are in and around us. So that's the first phase, is where there's this immunosuppression. It's well documented. Chronic stress can induce the state and create a collapse in this degree of functionality. But there's a worse phase, and a worse phase that's been documented in countless studies, and that is where your immune system fails to recognize the effects of cortisol. Basically, cortisol has an effect on every single cell in the body. And when we've been stressed for prolonged periods of time, eventually what happens is the cells don't even recognize cortisol at all in any way, shape, or form. And that will materialize, and the immune system becomes very dysregulated. No one is controlling it. No one's putting the lid on it. And many people are genetically predisposed to autoimmune diseases and inflammatory disorders. And this for me is the big risk, is that third converging epidemic on a already fragile society.
So, I mean, if we have a look at that, things are pretty serious. The first epidemic was the stress that you spoke of. The World Health Organization says it's the biggest problem that we're facing in the 21st century. Then you add this on, but then there's still a third wave coming.
Everything's a hypothesis, but if this continues, there's been countless studies and studies involving hundreds of thousands of people looking at chronic stress and mental health and how it affects immune functionality. And there's a very high prevalence, not so much in older population, but in younger populations of the development or in the development of autoimmune diseases in response to chronic stress. And this is an enormous challenge because some autoimmune diseases have a tremendous risk attached to them.
Okay, so just so that I can understand and that the layperson as well, when you talk about short interval stress, that's knowing that we need to go through a short-term stress to get to a better outcome. I remember a talk by someone called Kelly McGonigal on one of her TED Talks was called Make Stress Your Friend, and that's in the short term, obviously, that we can handle. But then in the long term, you say that with the cortisol levels, is it like the body starts to think that it's crying wolf? I've heard this so many times, there must be something wrong, and it doesn't actually have a response.
Exactly. So what happens is, I'll simplify a little bit, is that when we get stressed for short intervals, it's the perfect opportunity to upregulate your system. It's actually very health promoting. A little bit of stress, the little irritations, the little conflicts, they're actually not bad for you at all. Then when the stresses become a little bit more protracted and prolonged, what happens is that you're overproducing stress hormones. This hormone cortisol is an immunosuppressant. It controls the immune system. But if you're over-engaging the system for long periods of time, it becomes too controlling and your immune system starts to become compromised negatively. Then if it happens for a protracted, even more protracted period of time, eventually what happens is your cells say, this cortisol, there's a glitch in the system. We're not going to respond to what it's asking us to do. And the immune system, which normally has a braking mechanism or something that keeps it in check, is now let loose on the body and starts becoming very destructive. And that's the big concern going forward, is this destructive effect of the immune system, especially in younger populations, through this chronic stress situation that we're confronted with. And as I mentioned earlier, we're likely to be in this scenario for a very protracted period of time, 2 years at least.
Sure. Okay. Now, you've already answered one of the big questions I wanted to speak about, was from an immune function perspective. So you've already answered that. When we have a look then at the typical medical model is on a very reactive state, and it's not proactive in terms of prevention versus cure. How can things like this, because these things are not single events, there are going to be many events, whether it's the World Trade Center, viruses, all sorts of things. Do you feel that in a private capacity, number one, and also then from a national point of view, like looking at South Africa's government, that a lot more work should be done from a preventative point of view, education, support, those sorts of things?
So I think our government has been quite remarkable. I think, 100 days after the first COVID-19 case was identified, 7 days after the first 100 cases of COVID-19 was identified, we went into lockdown, and which was a lot faster than many other countries of the world, which has kept infection rates low. We've given ourselves about 4 to 6 weeks to mobilize our medical system, and it's been a very proactive approach as opposed to reactive. It's been quite remarkable and commendable. In terms of medicine being more a reactive discipline, or allopathic medicine being more a reactive discipline, everything has its role and has its time. There is a time to treat the symptoms, and that's the mandate, and doctors doing an exceptional job, and it's something that's growing and something that's developing. But there's also a responsibility, which is the proactive part that you talk of other professionals and of the individual themselves to protect themselves from the development or onset of ailments. We know enough now that health issues, whether it's mental health, physical health, is caused by a variety of different things: environmental pollution, poor nutrition, lack of exercise, and then of course stress is a major factor. we also know that we have a tremendous amount of power and a tremendous amount of weight in this respect in order to lower the risk. A best example of that is we take the best actuaries in the country and we say, we want to create one of the most successful businesses in the world, give us a model. And the actuaries come up with the vitality program, the discovery vitality program, saying it's, if you look after your health better, we're going to reward you. Everyone wins in that model, and it's changed the health landscape quite remarkably. So that just shows you the power of this proactive methodology and the understanding. I do feel that every practitioner, medical or allopathic or alternate practitioner, I think they all have a role and a responsibility and a place within this journey. Some are more involved in the steering of patients and individual in a lifestyle or in a direction where there's the self-autonomy, self-responsibility, encouraging them to make the right choices and do the right things. And then at the same time, if all else fails and there's a genetic element that's part of the process, or there's certain factors beyond their control and they do get ill, that's the time for the reactive process. The surgeon's going to come in, or the neurologist is going to be called in. These are vital components within this engine, and these levers are very much interdependent. So to answer your question, I don't think that that there's too much emphasis on reaction. I think there might be an opportunity for more emphasis on being proactive, as you rightly pointed out.
So one of the things I spoke about in one of my posts I did a while ago was, imagine taking one of the billion rand that's been set aside to stimulate growth in the country and spend that on educating the country. I firmly believe, of all the things, nutrition, like you spoke about, if we can sort our stress levels out, and we're talking about like super high neurological functions, executive functions, all of these things, so many other things would be changed. But I know that these things aren't mutually exclusive. If we have a look at exercise, nutrition, sleep, that they all levers pulling on each other, like you said. So what would you do if we were to have a look at the self-responsibility you're speaking about? What could some of the things be, like you spoke about in your book, about building the resilience, and some of the basic things to do to mitigate what's going to happen? We can't change the external environment, but we can change our internal environment with that self-responsibility. What would some of the key things be that you would suggest?
So I think that within the context of the challenges that we're confronted with, and they're immense, they're vast, they're unprecedented. Within the context of these issues, I think that we have to take a phasic and multifactorial or multidisciplinary approach to our stress. We can't just say, I'm feeling stressed today, go for a walk, or certainly in the last 5 weeks we couldn't, but or I'm feeling stressed today, do a yoga session, or if you're fine. I think it's a lot bigger than that, and I think one has to start drawing from a lot of different areas. And I think that the place to start, and the science has been very clear on it, the place to start is one's mindset. How one sees something is really how it can materialize. So if one sees something as a negative, unfortunately, it does unfold in that way. And there's been a series of Harvard studies showing that if you see stress as a vehicle, as something that will help you overcome the challenges that you're confronted with, help you overcome the obstacles that you face, knowing that we have this adrenaline in our system that will make us clearer and more energetic and feel less pain, knowing that this biological response is there to help you, not to harm you, is the first step. So this reframing process, stress is, the whole biological set is an advantage in these circumstances. I need to use it, not fear it, not resign myself to the fact that it's going to do harm and be detrimental to me. The second thing is to change the very nature of our behavior. Society for the last 3 decades has been very much of a zero tolerance environment, where if you're vulnerable, if you're not successful, or if you're not being the best version of yourself all the time and inspiring people around you, society doesn't want to know you. And we see that is so apt in the social media space, where everyone's projecting this amazing life and these big holidays and these lavish the luxuries that they have, and everyone's very attractive, and that's this world that doesn't really exist. It's make believe, and people believe that they're going to create more information from that. But here we're in a situation where the entire world is vulnerable. Every person is affected. No one is exempt. We're all feeling not the best version of ourselves. We're all feeling compromised in some way, shape, or form. Within this respect, we have a situation now where the old model of 3 decades, where if you're not projecting success and wealth and everything that we aspire to in this Western world that we live in, then you go hide in a corner, you become insular, you isolate yourself. That whole model that shouldn't exist, because the minute we isolate ourselves, the minute we disconnect in this period of pain, in this period of crisis, in the period of vulnerability, we become more susceptible to stress-related health issues. Conversely, every major, you mentioned it earlier, every major issue and threat that we faced in our long history, for thousands of years, we've had famines, we've had viral pandemics, we've had food shortages, we've had conflicts, we've had climate change, and we've got through it all, not by being insular and disconnecting. We've got through it by connection. We are stronger as a whole. We're weak as an individual. And this is the time to actually put aside your vulnerabilities, express your vulnerabilities, be tolerant of other people's vulnerabilities. Because when we connect, we create biological shifts. And these biological shifts, I love my boy. I'm busy now. So, okay, come quickly. You can sit here for a second. And we create these biological shifts.
No.
Okay. That's distracting. Go. Okay, you have to go. Go to mommy. All right. And so we're creating these we create these biological shifts that shift our chemistry, neurochemistry, and hormonal profile, where we become completely immune to the adverse effects of stress. When we connect with people, when we care for them, when we're empathetic, when we show compassion, when we show support for other people, we release this amazing hormone, this amazing neuromolecule called oxytocin, which is in the book, and Kelly mentions it as well in some of her narratives. And this hormone is basically the anti-venom for stress. It's the buffer against everything negative that stress stands for. And the best defense that we could have is this connection piece. But it might not be enough, because there's another element to this. And the other element that we have to consider and realize is the fact that stress can be overwhelming. And every time we evoke our stress axes, it becomes more and more damaging. And there's certain centers and areas in the brain which are responsible for shutting stress down. As our cortisol rises and our adrenaline rises, what tends to happen is that it's picked up in the brain, and centers in the brain say, it's okay, guys, shut it down. It's no problem. It's enough. Go off. And what happens is, if we've been stressed repeatedly or for too long, these centers become damaged, and we can't turn stress off, even though the stress might have passed. And in these type of instances, we need to connect with the fail-safe. Our body's ingenious. We've been given this incredible gift where when we're in crisis and we can't shut it down, we can access the system and it will create biological restoration literally within 30 seconds. And this system is known as the vagus nerve. And you as a chiropractor are all too familiar with the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve can be stimulated through chiropractics, through physio, through osteopathy, through a variety of different channels within the manual therapy space. But it can also be activated by deep breathing exercises, massage. It can be activated by meditation, by yoga, acupuncture, reflexology. These are all modalities that are vagal stimulators. And when you feel just over-aroused, you must engage in one of these activities on a regular basis in order to just keep recalibrating a very fragile biological ecosystem. But that's not even enough, because now we're moving into the next stage. Because what happens with stress, and this is really, I think it's talking to your point, you're just getting me warmed up now, is that when we get stressed, and we've been in this phase now 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks of this, and first anticipatory stress, then the realization stress, and now the actualization stress. But when we stressed for this period of time, we're still immune to or impervious to the effects of stress. We might have emotional shifts. We might have days where we're not feeling as robust and as healthy as we did before, but nothing sinister. Stress hasn't inculcated us itself into us to such an extent that it's created a chronic disease risk or shortened our lifespan or affected our cells in any way, shape, or form. But now it starts doing that. We generally only get sick, not during the stress, but following the stress, following the crisis. The system is so heightened and so aroused and so vigilant that stress at the time almost has no obvious effects on us. But stress, the following or the aftermath of a stressful event or circumstances or situation, is where we start feeling, oh, I'm feeling vulnerable, I'm feeling weak, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling low, I'm feeling everything that I didn't think I'd experience once the stress has passed. And this is the phase and the time to focus on the rebuilding element, because stress hormones, what they tend to do is they tend to lower the production of certain neurochemicals like serotonin, dopamine, and then this powerful protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And these hormones are responsible for mood, emotion, cognition, the brain's integrity. And the more stress hormones are in the system, the less they produce or the less effectively they work. And invariably what happens is there's this shift in the brain. There's a reduction in brain size, there's a disconnection in the brain, there's stem cell malfunction within the brain, a whole variety of different things that will start occurring in response to this ongoing stress, which only surfaces afterwards. So we've got to choose activities, we've got to choose lifestyle engagements and lifestyle choices that augment, that can rebuild, that can increase serotonin, that can increase dopamine, that can increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And this is exposure to sunlight. This is things where this is a case where exercise is highly valuable. This is a case where certain dietary choices like lots of vegetables and lots of seasonal fruits and a variety of different foods and wild fish and omega-3 fatty acids are all going to play their role in just keeping your body strong and healthy and robust and offsetting these negative elements. But lifestyle still is not enough. So now we've gone through this journey where it's been change your mindset, change your reality, change your behavior, protect yourself, turn stress off at will. We've also been through this phase where you better keep yourself strong because the stress hormones have been antagonistic to our very essence and well-being. But there's one more step here, and that is the resilience piece. Because resilience can be defined as our ability to adapt and change. And what we do know now is that the world that we knew 5 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago, will not exist in the future. It'll be a very different place. And we have to be agile. We have to be adaptable. We have to be able to see it with a new lens. We need to create a new template in order to be successful there. And the interesting thing about adaptability and resilience is that it's underpinned by something called neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to form new connections. And it's basically like having a brain that can change its software anytime it wants to. You know, you've got a Mac, or you can change software if the circumstances change. Or the brain can change its hardware, can do anything. It's the most remarkable thing. But another interesting point about resilience is that there's more to this neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is underpinned by a few different elements. It's underpinned by our serotonin production. It's underpinned by our dopamine production. It's underpinned by a molecule called neuropeptide Y. It's underpinned by a particular hormone or protein, which I've mentioned, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's underpinned by norepinephrine, and it's underpinned by a whole stress axis itself. It's basically the hormones in the brain and how they relate to the adrenal glands and the responses that occur following stress. And in order to really augment our resilience, we have to make choices again on the lifestyle front. It's certain supplements that can actually elevate these molecules in such a way that it can create more plasticity. We need to choose certain dietary protocols. Intermittent fasting is a very effective way of increasing some of these molecules. We need to choose we need to choose the type of exercise very carefully. Certain types of exercise can augment this process. Aerobic exercise exceeding 18 minutes up to about 40 to 60 minutes can be very positive in increasing the right chemicals to facilitate neuroplasticity. There's certain aspects with regards to sleep. There's certain aspects with regards to sunlight exposure. Again, it ties into that rebuilding model, but it takes it to the next gear. So there's really 5 points and 5 processes in this resilience model. And as I mentioned, just going into this very lengthy narrative is that, you know, we at a time where the stress is unprecedented. If there was a stress barometer, it's completely overspilling. And unlike other occasions where we know that it will pass, yes, this will pass, but it's not going to pass as soon as we need it to, as soon as we want it to. And this is why only this complete model, this bigger process can really make a difference and really transform our reality.
So yes, I mean, I agree from a holistic point of view, and I'm just very aware of time, Richard. So, and I know we could dive into this for hours and hours and hours. I mean, I can sense and feel your passion about this and your energy. So, I just wanted to say, listen, thank you so much. I hope we can do this again sometime, maybe face to face in the future.
That'd be great.
Everyone listening, your website is suttonhealth.co.za. That correct?
That's right. Yes.
SUTTON health.co.za. The Stress Code is an awesome book. Brilliant stuff. Thanks very much, Richard. I really hope that we can share a smoothie sometime, or do some interval training together, or just have a good chat. So thank you so much. And
thank you for your time.
All the best with the lockdown.
Thank you. And to you.
Good stuff.
Thanks again.
Cheers, Richard. Bye-bye.